The topic of today's talk is, as you could hear just a second ago, is Walking a Thin Line, the short story about finding the right tone in Frostpunk. I don't know if it will translate nicely to the other games, but I will tell you the story about us finding the right tone of really problematic topics of, I don't know, child labor, amputations, food shortage, and such. Um, I am from 11-bit Studios, and as you could also hear just a second ago, I was working on This War of Mine, the Little Ones, and the topic of this talk, Frostpunk. Not every single one of you played Frostpunk, so I will tell you just a thing about it. Frostpunk is the first society survival game. An unique combination of city building and social commentary. We were heavily inspired by the stories of extreme endurance, as well as more systemic research on how the human psyche performs under the long-term stress when the survival is at stake. The psychological aspects of living on the International Space Station or being posted to the Antarctic research stations. And it looks like this. As a player, through the city building gameplay and answering dilemmas coming out of them, you are asked about various questions about humanity, morality, in the frozen world where every nation fell. Every scenario has its own unique theme: immigration crisis, cost of survival, etc. Just like the last one we just released a month ago, which is heavily inspired by the Titanic catastrophe. But what is the main question we are asking about this game? Is this: does the end justify the means? This is the backbone of nearly every design decision in Frostpunk, and also what is to cross the line? What is, even when the survival is at stake? To make crossing the line possible, the idea of laws appeared. We already had the solid city gameplay aspect. It looked like this of a gameplay, but we lacked the society part, the part that will connect people in the city to the player to the people in the city. In order to do that, the player have to make a decision that will change something in the world of a game. And especially in this case, player has to have the power to change something in the society, of a Frostpunk. At first, the construction of laws was kind of simple. It's if the certain conditions have been met, the dilemma appeared, the screen with text and graphic and the choices, where you could apply the law. It was nice. We were kind of happy about it, and it looked like this. Thank you. This is the infamous child labor screen from the first prototypes of a law system. Internally, we call this the dilemma. A screen with proper text and graphics, which is asking the player to make a choice. It can be a big or small, but its purpose is all the same. One of the first dilemmas and laws we created was child labor, the question about putting little ones into work. It is resonating with today's culture and societies where it is shunned, but at the same time, it is deeply grounded in the culture of 19th century, where the child labor was stupidly common and something completely normal, especially in the fabrics, the manufacturers in Great Britain. That seemingly randomness, didn't work because for the player it was random. There was no connection. It worked not only on a visceral level, on the moment-to-moment morality of a player, but most importantly, it appeared random for the player. We already knew that certain conditions has been met, and that's why the screen appeared after at all. But for the player, he was just messing around, building the city, I don't know, building the road, or applying the workers to building, and pff, the screen appeared, and you can make a law about, I don't know, child labor. There was no planning ahead, no calculation we could comment on later and such. We had to address that randomness. So the first ideas, the early concept of Book of Laws appeared. Which is right now one of our key features in Frostpunk. With Book of Laws, we address players' agency. We let the players plan ahead with laws, and because of its tech-like structure, where the player can open it at any moment of the game and sign the law, let's say allowing people to eat the soup and the soup only for the rest of their lives. It looked nice, it worked nice, it supported the quick question by allowing the player to cross the line in his head and to strategize. And of course, it gave the player the context for the further events coming. And the Book of Laws looks like this right now. This is not the first iteration. The first iteration were made in Unity, if I remember correctly. We iterate that thing through the whole development, changing the laws, changing the name of the laws, changing connections, the site, how it looked, but more or less it stayed that way, and it worked great this time. Still, it lacked something. We had the laws which were not connected to, well, adaptation tree, when you can make laws about making compromises to survive for more time, like you can make more food rations from lesser amount of raw food, or you can decide on the method of treating the dead people in your city, like you have snow pits, mass graves, or you can decide that this is the city where the proper cemetery can exist. But we lacked something else. We lacked the support question. We wanted to ask the player, what is does the end justify the means? What is to cross the line? And to answer that question, we had to give him something else, which is the creeping normality, aka the boiling frog theory. From the boiling frog theory, you can learn that if you throw the poor frog into the straight into the boiling water, it will run away. But if you put the same frog into the pot with cold water and raise its temperature gradually and slowly, it will not panic and eventually boil to death. Biologically, this is bullshit. But the boiling frog theory is not about frogs, it is about societies slowly turning into authoritarian or totalitarian regimes. Step after step, law after law, harsher and harsher law is applied and turned boof. We're fucked. This is the theory we wanted to tell about the player, and to do it properly, we had to give the player the proper laws and proper tools to make it happen, to make the toys. We created the storyline of Londoners, the story about the scared people who want to leave the city because they are not believing in its survival, which are giving the player the big problems of escalating fever in this content. And well, we gave the player the tools, proper tools, to counter them. Like this. This is the second tree of Frostpunk. It has two sides, the religion part and the order part. This is the order part. Those are the tools of power with a big spoon of creeping normality. Laws harsher and harsher, as I said a second before, step by step. From the single neighborhood watch, which is on the top, to the proper guard put with police forces and tools of propaganda, to the ultimate new beginning, when you're basically making the French Revolution all over again, and you're making everyone who is opposing you dead. And with them, the first consequences appeared. The consequences of having excess police forces with too much power, for example. The construction of those consequences, how they appear in our game, is like this: the law and lots and lots on other conditions, like the proper time of day, how much time is left to the end of the game. Do you have enough resources or people, or is another law signed as well? This is the basic connection between the player and the society. 80%, nearly, I suppose this is, I'm making it out basically, but more or less 80% of Frostpunk narration is tightly connected to the player's decision and the gameplay, and are heavily gameplay driven. The manifestation, for example, will not happen if the basic needs of the people are secured. The consequences of law will not happen if the law is not signed by the player. We may make dozens of them, connecting the player to the laws he made in the long run. We already knew. This is after this war of mine, it is impossible to connect the player to the whole society. So we made the consequences. All about individuals, the single human beings being affected by the laws. They could not appear instantly. They could start, I don't know, a few days over that or something. But the point is, it works. It connected the player to the people. It humanized the society in Frostpunk, and it gave the player the non-visceral reason to stop and think about it. It created another layer of narration. What we learned about that approach, they appear in the game as little stories. Rarely, but very rarely, they are bigger than, I don't know, 3 steps. The beginning, the middle ground, and the end. We found that in the game, in our game, in Frostpunk game, oversaturation of the side stories does not end well, because first of all, you have a proper storyline which have to be in the foreground, and the consequences are the background of the stories. And also you have the whole city building aspect of a game, who's making you playing the game basically. That's how you play the game. And if there are too much screens, too much things popping out of it, it is overwhelming. It is just too much. You can't digest so much information about so many people, even if the stories are about the single person. But that approach with the whole law system, the book of law system, gave us this: the post-playthrough reflection, and in the moment empathy, because post-playthrough reflection was after the playthrough, when it doesn't matter if that was the literally end of a game, of the player stopped playing the game, but there was reflections of our players were still thinking about the laws they signed and the consequences of them, and of course in the moment empathy, moment to moment, the decisions which are really gameplay driven or gameplay necessities. I don't know, you have food shortage and you have to do something about it, so you're applying the law, and there are consequences next. With dozens and dozens of consequences, well, another problem appeared. We found ourselves balancing between negligence and dark comedy, to be exact, especially because you have to really balance in the consequences like that, with a proper screen, with graphics, text, choices, the context. You have everything here. If you make consequences which is chewable, to say, in the case of adult people, it can be unbearable if it connects with a child, or somebody who can't fight with himself, for himself. especially the balance, and not only the balance of the choices. We found ourselves deep in the cruelty part of consequences appearing, because first of all we made the consequences of law about the law tree, the purpose and order. So after that, when we started to make consequences about the religion and the creepy normality of how the religion can be treated too, we found ourselves, well, disrespectful, because on everywhere was death, basically, and unnecessary cruelty, and we were not comfortable with that. That was not the story we wanted to tell you. One of the problems behind that were ourselves oversaturated by the cruel things we read about, and it is really hard to maintain that balance between things if you are working on such game for over 2 years. Let's go back to the beginning, the sustain life. The other part of this law is radical treatment, which is basically allowing your medical teams to perform amputations on the people who are severely frostbitten with a chance with death. We call them internally in the game, they are gravely ill. They are on the brink of death, and sometimes it is necessary to cut the limb off. The source of disabilities in Frostpunk is not only this law, but also the harsh temperature, which is getting sometimes into -60 Celsius or even further down. And we wanted to tell the proper stories about the people with disabilities, people who can't work. So one of the first stories we were telling the players about, and which were resonating with them properly, and they were doing just fine, was the story of a single human being which is affected by this frostbite, and he refused to have his limbs taken away. And it is your decision as a player, as a captain of a city, to decide for him. You can make him lose his limb and save his life, or you can leave him to slowly die because of gangrene. This has the proper second consequences. Your decision, and it worked really nice. It resonated with people. It was impactful. But it was, at the same time, it was respectful, because as a player you are making the hard choice for another human being, and because you are feeling afterwards is sometimes it is regret, it is sadness, it is pain of being when you have to make that decision for someone else, you don't know what to think about it. And this is what we achieved. It didn't have so many iterations after all. We had the little subtle hardcore problems with it because of the graphics. Because we wanted to show the people that man he is sick and he will die, because they need a reason to make the hard choice, because they need to believe one of those choices is better. So we made few graphics. One of them was awful, absolutely awful, and it focused on the gangrene part. But after all, we found the proper middle ground of showing the person lying on the bed with a medical team, and something bad happening with his leg. But then we wanted to make more, because we liked it. We liked the way it resonated with people, and we wanted to tell more stories about the people with disabilities, people who are unable to work, who are basically what we partially, because of gameplay-wise, thought about them as a burden of a society in the Frostpunk world, where if you can't work, you can help. If you can't help, you're a burden. You are still eating, and the food is short. So I personally made things like this. This is the systemic approach to the people with disabilities. But it didn't work. It began boom. Why? It had no sense. Like, no, those at the very beginning you are starting with 80 people, maybe 100 people in your city. So all these people know each other. They kind of care about each other. So that approach, the clash of being able to work and not being able to work, didn't make sense at all. It was Londoners, the clash of two kinds of people, all of it again. It was unnecessary, cruel, and it was disrespectful, to be honest. It was not the story about people with disabilities who have problems, who want to be normal again. So we throw it away, and instead of that, we focused on the message we want to tell, which was people with disabilities are not our enemy in Frostpunk, because it's all too easy to treat people in Frostpunk as a resource, another kind of resource. And if the resource is not useful, it's not useful, and you are not caring about them. But I think, and other people supposedly are thinking we've done it good. This is the thing I was talking about just a few seconds ago, or a few minutes. The frightened patient. The story about you as a captain deciding on the life or death or future of single person affected by your law. And also we made little short stories about disabled people being able to do things, because that was the story we wanted to talk about the society, the single people affected by the random things in this world, like a frostbite or your systemic lawful approach to the cutting limbs in cases. And well, we done good, I suppose. Yeah, we were very afraid about it before the release, and after all, we found out we done good job about it. Yeah.
What did you really expect from the audience? Like, what kinds of feelings should they be emotional, or just to be more retrospective, or and did they really felt that way?
Mm-hmm. Well, to be honest, we expected from the players the retrospective grief, just like in this War of Mine. We think that the games doesn't necessarily have to be fun to play, but they should be meaningful. And by meaningful, the meaning of the word meaningful is worthwhile.
Is there something you would do like differently now than like when you already released the game, since working with society instead of working with like a personality is much harder? Maybe you have some, answers you didn't have before.
Not really. That everything in Frostpunk development was iterating things through all the whole process of development, and the answers we got and the things we achieved in the players are not something we could achieve right now from the beginning. It is the process of iteration and fixing things over and over and making them over and over to work better. So yeah, so one of the more harsh lessons we learned was that connecting the player with the whole society at once will not work at all, however hard you will try. So maybe we would not waste around 2 months of our lives to trying to do that. But that's on, I don't know, month or 2 months in the 3-year development. So
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause for Pawel.